Prime Minister is freshly rehired with a new contract, another 28 years as Prime Minister, and his big idea for productivity was a talk fest. How inspiring.
I think that's not fair, as you'd expect, Paul Murray. I know you and I are largely going to disagree on this, but he's already commissioned the Productivity Commission to do a review, so they've actually been working on that for a while. I do think it's good to have a roundtable to bring together unions, business, other leaders in Australia. I was lucky enough to go to the Jobs and Skills Summit. I know there were jokes.
Did you get a show bag? What did you get backstage? Did you get a crayon from the butcher's paper? That was the 2020 Talk Fest.
Major economic changes that came out of that.
Did you get a badge? What did they give you?
The Women's Employment Task Force, headed up by none other than the wonderful Sam Mostyn, has significantly and materially increased the amount of women in jobs in Australia, and that has improved our economic productivity. So, Paul, every now and again, it is a good idea to get Australians left, right, big business, small business, unions, other stakeholders together to have a chat and come to some good policy ideas that the government can work
my guess
industry
is that
on. Because I want to say this, governments are good, but they need to work with businesses and unions.
Correct, in the triangle of dependence.
So, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a roundtable. It's not the only thing the government's doing on productivity, but I think it's a good thing. Right. And we need to get more innovation, get more companies, do some...
But James, hasn't the Treasurer already told us, I can't do that this term. I've got to be re-elected. We've got to be re-elected again by that point in time. Remember old nasty Nikki Savva saying that regardless of the election result, Albo had to get out of the way. Notice she hasn't got back to that because, of course, the plan was, eventually we're on our way to Chalmers or, Annika Wells or someone, a little wilder than old mate Albo. But here we go, another talk fest. This is an exact cut and copy of the first term, and they're basically going to do that with the exception of the Voice and a referendum in the middle, and we're just going to get more of the same. And the people who will be understandably raging about cost of living in a year's time, many of whom are the ones who re-elected this mob who've been doing the damage.
Yeah, but come on, Paul, he's got a mandate to have these roundtable conversations. They don't lead to much, though. You end up with a pile of paperwork that's hardly worth reading. It's the same as the last report that was done. And what happens in the long run? It's all ignored and people continue living in hardship. And that's the biggest problem that we've got here. We constantly hear about this conversation about productivity, and yet no one is calling out the fact that we're not going to meet these targets that have been set by this government. They haven't reached the target of bringing down power costs. They haven't reached the target of being able to house those homeless and those still seeking cheaper accommodation across the country. What's really interesting today, Paul, and I'm so refreshed by the idea we're getting Tyron Whitten into our Senate. Here's a bloke that's got an enormous amount of experience when it comes to developments and building and construction, some of the biggest projects across the country, mining and also hydro schemes. But one of his things that he pointed out to me today is we're still building houses that are the non-productive way. And sure, I don't want to see a change to the way in which the quality of house that's built, but there are different newer techniques available, like batching pads, where there's all this automated tilt slabs that can be laid and put up, and we can actually achieve with new technology greater productivity that builds houses quicker, provides the accommodation to those people out there that are still living in cars and living in tents or living on the street. And yet no one has spoken about this. So I can't wait for that new fresh blood to come into the Senate and actually raise these things on the floor of Parliament and actually get some real productivity and changes moving within that Parliament.
Well, in relation to housing, the Housing Minister, who definitely wasn't sacked, definitely was not sacked as the Home Affairs Minister. Remember that. She's just a good performer. She's saying, and I love this here, right, because she's saying she's not a YIMBY, which means yes in my backyard, build everything everywhere, but she's out and about saying that it's, among other empty words, it's time to roll our sleeves up. Anyway, what's she saying today?
For the first time since the post-war period, our government is rolling up its sleeves and actually getting on with the job of funding and building homes with our states and territories and local government. What's going to be required is 3 years of serious reform with the states and territories and local government. We're up for that, and we know they are too.
Linda, can I ask a quick question, then take it wherever you want? When they talk about funding homes, they're talking about building social housing, right? And that's a good thing because there's tens of thousands, in fact, close to a couple 100,000 people who want to go into those things. But they're not talking about funding low-cost units in suburbs for people to be able to move in and rent into, correct?
Look, it's a great question. Of course, former Labor government put forward billions of dollars for social housing. They gave that to the states. The states are getting underway. But as part of the housing accord signed by all three levels of government, I signed it on behalf of local governments, there are housing targets, and there are also ways to bring together private capital like superannuation to invest in housing for the market or for people for rent or for a range of other purposes. Again, we need more housing. This is so critical for Australia's future. We've got states like here in New South Wales where the number of young people is precipitously declining. Like, it is so important that we provide enough housing to get it to a more affordable point. But you can't do that with government alone, Paul. And what is so disappointing is to hear things like James was just saying about the fact that actually, James, you're just ignoring all this work that's been done. There's been work to the building standards at the state level. There's been so much work to look at innovative technologies. No, I'm not saying that either, but there's been work to harmonise the building standard across the country done by former Minister Ed Husic. There's been work by all the state and territory governments, Labor and Liberal, to partner with the Commonwealth government on that.
Yeah, but you say work's been done, but it's not producing anything.
Well, it is, mate.
You've got so much talk going on.
Being built right now that are micro-housing.
When it comes to housing.
Prefabricated housing. That is just absolutely untrue. And if your friend
but you're building cheap, nasty stuff that lasts 5 to 15 years before it's destroyed.
If your new senator wanted to run on the importance of technology for buildings, he should have run for the Western Australian State Parliament, because that's where the majority of those decisions are made, James. So it's just so disappointing to hear you
saying that the decisions are made on a federal level.
All the good work Labor government.
Well, Albo's trying to make it a national issue. He's the one front and centre of this,
course
isn't
he
he, James? Yeah.
And it needs to be front and centre of the national agenda, because clearly the states aren't doing the job that's required. So don't give me this BS and try and shut down good people trying to come up with solutions to try and build homes for those people homeless. The reality is you lied to the people of this country by saying you could build 1.2 million properties in 5 years. That's just utter BS. It's a lie.
It's happening now, James. I don't know why you're saying it's a lie. These houses are being built
because
all over the country
is saying
because
it can't
of what Labor has
You're going to fall at least 200,000 homes short of what you've projected. And that's a lie that hasn't just been told by Labor. It's been told by the coalition during the election period, and you've been caught out for it, but you will never admit it. Instead, you just keep blowing this hot air up people's backsides.
Well, with that beautiful image, and a lot of breaking news and a lot of stuff around, including a very long conversation about productivity, but I stand by it. Sometimes dry wheat Bix, not as tasty, but important for the fibre.